Chapter 5, Major FOMO. Ring! The bell jingled over the door as Dawn returned from sweeping the front stoop and cleaning the windows. Her arms ached and her feet were tired, but she didn't dare complain. Not after what had happened at school. Despite her efforts to erase the morning's events from her memory, they haunted her. Principal Hubert's voice still rang in her ears. This behavior is unacceptable at Castletown. Usually chatty and chipper, her aunts had barely spoken to her since they picked her up. Dawn wanted to tell them that it wasn't her fault. But from experience, they knew that defending herself would get her into more trouble. Nobody would believe her side of the story. She'd learned that the hard way when her parents sent her away. Anger stoked her heart like the wood-fired stove in her aunt's kitchen. It fueled her desire for revenge. Each flicker said, "This is so unfair. Leah is a liar." Her aunts still hadn't called her parents. Yet. But she knew it was coming. She could feel it itching closer with each passing minute. The dread ate away at her, making her feel sick to her stomach. Dawn picked her way through the store's cluttered aisles, carting her broom and cleaning supplies. Her eyes swept over the reclaimed fragments of other people's lives. Porcelain dolls and toys from another generation, fancy tea sets, souvenir silver spoons, and all manner of worn furniture. There was even a rack of old sunglasses by the register. Dawn grabbed a pair and tried them on for fun, frowning through the scratched lenses. She set them back and turned around, and accidentally thrust her face into the bouquets of roses on the checkout counter. She caught a big whiff. Achoo! "Dearie, is that you?" It was Aunt Fleur. "Oh, dang it, I thought perhaps it might be a customer," Fleur said, letting out a deep sigh. "I heard the bell and got my hopes up." "Sorry, just me," Dawn said. She scratched her nose. It itched terribly now that she was in proximity to the roses again. "Well, if you're all finished from the front," Aunt Fleur went on, her voice sounding deflated. She was disappointed in her niece, Dawn could tell. But more than that, she seemed worried about the shop. "We'd like you to clean the shed out back." "The shed?" Dawn said. That sounded extra dusty. "Yes," Fleur said. "It could use a proper cleaning." "Oh, dearie, do be careful out there," Aunt Mary added, popping out of the back office. She clutched an overflowing ledger of receipts and expenses. Her face was pinched with worry. What do you mean?" Dawn asked. "Well, most of that inventory hasn't been touched in eons," Fleur chimed in. "It's stuff we picked up in bulk at estate auctions." "But you never know," Mary said, raising her eyebrows hopefully. "Something valuable might be stashed back there." "Yes, ma'am," Dawn said. She wasn't sure what eons meant, only that it sounded like an awful long time. That meant she'd be sneezing her way through another afternoon of chores. Dawn stood in front of the door of the shed, or to the shed. It was a derelict aluminum-sided building shoved in the back of the parking lot. It looked dimly lit, ghostly, and run down. She felt both grossed out and a little bit afraid of what lurked inside. But she had to do her chores. Dawn reached for the door and yanked it open. "Caw, caw, caw!" Black shadows with wings swarmed out at her. Their razor-sharp claws swiped for her face. "No, get away!" Dawn yelled, leaping back in fear as the cruel intentions of the ravens burst out. The birds screamed and screeched, sounding like demons, upset that she disturbed their dwelling. "Caw, caw, caw!" One scratched her cheek, just missing her eye, and drawing blood. It stung and it made her cry a little bit in pain. "Get away, you hideous creatures!" Dawn yelped, grabbing her broom for protection. She waved at the ravens, shooing them away from the shed. Black feathers swirled in the air around her like dark snowfall. Her adversaries screamed in outrage. But then, fortunately, they dispersed and flew toward the forest on the other side of town. Dawn reached up and touched her face. The cut was shallow and not serious. Her aunts had warned her about old junk being stored in the unit, but they hadn't said anything about evil birds. I hate nature, John thought in annoyance. The door to the shed creaked, swaying in the wind and banging into the surrounding aluminum siding. Dawn peered at the interior. Light slanted through the dingy, crud-caked windows, making the dust swirl in an elaborate dance. If the actual shop was cluttered, then the shed was overrun with junk. Nothing was organized. Things were just piled in heaps. Dawn studied the first items she came to. Creepy dolls, frayed furniture, chipped teacups, and kitchen stuff. Most of the artifacts were broken or stained or useless. Or all three. How long has it been here? Dawn began sifting through the piles and attempting to sort them. The deeper she got into the shed, the stranger the items became. Some looked like they'd been stashed back there for, well, eons. Medieval tapestries, dusty and obscured, hung on the walls. She also discovered a rusty sword with a bejeweled hilt, a tattered baby carrier, and stacks of old books with weathered spines and yellowing pages. One tapestry depicted a black dragon breathing emerald fire, and roses snaking up a castle wall like weeds. A handsome brown-haired prince battled the dragon, clutching a sword. Dawn picked up the sword she found and studied the elaborate hilt. Sword of Truth was emblazoned on it. She wondered if it was the same one in the tapestry, but quickly dismissed that thought. If anything, it was probably a fake. Everything back there was old junk that nobody wanted, right? After wading to the back of the shed, dusty and exhausted, Dawn slumped down on the floor and fished out her phone. She miraculously got a signal out there of all places. Feeling her heart race, Dawn flipped to her social media profile, scanning the posts and pics. She navigated to the page for her new middle school and spotted Leah's name. She hesitated, then clicked on it, even though she knew it was a bad idea. Pictures from Leah's birthday party flooded the screen. Dawn scrolled through them. The party was princess-themed, with fancy cakes and treats piled on a table, dancing and karaoke, and even a pool out back where kids swam and partied. The party looked like a total blast. Everyone from her class was having the best time, and here Dawn was, alone, miserable, and sulking her way through a dusty shed, surrounded by creepy, vicious birds, worthless junk, and who knew what other horrors. But she couldn't help it. She kept scrolling through vids and pics of Leah's party, feeling worse and worse with each refresh. Leah wore a bright pink party dress and clutched a bouquet of red roses. A golden crown sat atop her flowing blonde hair. All her classmates surrounded her and sang happy birthday as a huge cake shaped like a castle with 13 candles was brought out. Leah closed her eyes, made a wish, and blew them all out with one breath. Everyone cheered. The caption under the vid read, "Hail to the princess," followed by crown emojis. Tears pricked Dawn's eyes, making the vid go blurry. How dare Leah do this to her? She had major FOMO. It just wasn't fair. That was what she got for trying to do the right thing and follow the rules for once. Clearly, that was a big mistake. Dawn started sobbing angry tears. She kicked the heap of junk next to her. Smash! The pile almost collapsed on top of her. Dawn leapt back just in time to avoid being buried. Oh no, she thought, as it crashed to the ground and scattered around her. If her aunts found out, she'd get in even more trouble. Once the dust cleared, Dawn reached to pick up the stuff, shoving her hand into the nearest stack, when suddenly, "Ouch!" she cried out. Something sharp had stabbed her finger. She sifted through the pile, unearthing an antique spinning wheel. It had a bench seat, a wooden wheel, and a spindle. Despite its age, the spindle was still needle sharp. Dawn looked at her fingertip. A drop of blood oozed out where she'd pricked it. The blood trickled down and hit the ground. Caw, caw! Suddenly, ravens burst into the shed, swirling around her and diving at her head. Dawn raised her arms and ducked down. Their feathers tickled her skin, making her squirm. But then, something far worse happened. Green flames exploded out of the spinning wheel, lighting up the shed with emerald fire. The heat hit Dawn's body, searing her skin. Everything was going to go up in flames. Fear shot through Dawn. She grabbed her phone to call the fire department, but then lowered it slowly. Somehow, nothing else in the shed was catching on fire. What kind of fire is this? The unnatural flames licked at the spinning wheel, but it didn't burn. Even stranger, there was no smoke either. Just the sensation of heat wafting off it. What's happening? Dawn stammered. Suddenly, a terrible laugh reverberated out of the fire. Who's there? Dawn gasped. The flames exploded into the shape of a tall woman with a black and purple robe that peeked into a sharp collar. Dawn stared at her in shock. She had pale green skin, long spindly fingers tapering into spiky nails that could easily serve as weapons, and a pair of razor-sharp horns cresting her head, giving her a horrifying and supernatural appearance. Her face was elongated, almost unnatural, ending in a pointy chin. Even more unnerving were her eyes. They glowed with pale yellow fire and fixed on Dawn. The woman had an icy beauty to her. Dawn thought a strange but alluring combination. She wielded a long staff crowned by a glowing crystal orb. Her deep voice echoed out, "Who dares summon me?"